The pulsating music and raucous laughter of the party faded into the distance as I stumbled out into the cool night air. My head was spinning from the cocktails and shots I had indulged in throughout the evening, but the idea of waiting for a taxi or calling a friend seemed too tedious in my inebriated state. So, with a false sense of confidence fueled by liquid courage, I fished the keys to my car out of my pocket and made my way to the parking lot. The streetlights cast long, ominous shadows as I navigated the winding roads that led out of the city. The alcohol coursing through my veins dulled my senses, but I stubbornly clung to the belief that I could make it home without incident. My grip on the steering wheel was unsteady, and I squinted through bleary eyes at the road ahead, the yellow lines blurring together into a disorienting haze. Despite the late hour, the road was surprisingly deserted, and the only sounds were the low hum of my engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. With each passing mile, the darkness seemed to deepen, pressing in on me from all sides like a suffocating weight. But I pushed aside the creeping sense of unease, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. With each passing mile, the road seemed to narrow, winding its way deeper into the heart of the wilderness. The towering trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers grasping at the darkness. The feeble glow of my headlights barely penetrated the thick veil of shadows that enveloped me, casting eerie shapes and shadows across the road. As I continued to drive, a sense of unease settled over me like a suffocating blanket. The isolation of the forest seemed to press in on all sides, suffusing the air with a palpable sense of dread. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white with tension, as I strained to see through the inky blackness ahead. But despite my best efforts, there was no sign of civilization on the horizon. The road stretched endlessly before me, disappearing into the darkness with no end in sight. Panic surged through my veins as I realized the gravity of my situation. I was alone, stranded in the heart of the wilderness with no way to call for help. Desperation clawed at me as I watched the gas gauge inch perilously closer to empty. With each passing minute, the needle dipped lower and lower, taunting me with the looming specter of running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere. I cursed under my breath, my heart pounding in my chest as I frantically scanned the surroundings for any sign of a gas station, but there was nothing but looming, shadowy woods stretching as far as the eye could see. And then, just as my fear threatened to consume me, disaster struck. With a final sputter, my car shuddered to a halt, the engine falling silent with a mournful groan. I sat frozen in my seat, my mind reeling with disbelief as I stared out into the darkness, the realization of my predicament sinking in like a lead weight in the pit of my stomach. I was stranded, alone and vulnerable, in the heart of the wilderness with no way to call for help. The oppressive silence of the forest closed in around me, broken only by the sound of my own shaky breaths. And as I sat there, engulfed in darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something sinister lurked just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting to pounce. Alone in the silence of the night, fear wrapped its icy fingers around my heart as I sat stranded in the darkness of my car. The oppressive weight of the wilderness pressed in on me from all sides, suffusing the air with a palpable sense of dread. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl sent shivers down my spine, amplifying the sense of isolation that enveloped me like a suffocating shroud. I clung to the illusion of safety within the confines of my car, but deep down, I knew that I was not alone. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air, as if some malevolent force lurked just beyond the edge of the trees, watching and waiting with bated breath. And then, like a whisper carried on the wind, I sensed its presence, a shadowy figure moving stealthily through the darkness, its form barely discernible against the inky blackness of the night. My breath caught in my throat as I watched in paralyzed horror, unable to tear my eyes away from the looming specter that drew closer with each passing moment. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as the figure approached, its movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the fear that radiated from me like a tangible aura. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end as a chill raced down my spine, and I instinctively reached for the door handle, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. But even as I fumbled for escape, a voice pierced the silence, chilling and low, sending a shiver down my spine. "Come out," it whispered, its words dripping with malice and intent. Panic surged through me like a tidal wave as I realized the true nature of the threat that loomed before me. I knew then that I had to flee, to escape the clutches of whatever malevolent force stalked me in the darkness. With trembling hands, I fumbled for the keys in the ignition, desperate to start the car and put distance between myself and the looming specter that threatened to consume me. But fate had other plans. for as I turned the key in the ignition, there was only silence, the engine refusing to respond, as if paralyzed by the same terror that gripped me. And as the sinister figure drew closer, its features shrouded in darkness, I knew that there was no escape, that I was at the mercy of forces beyond my comprehension. With a trembling hand, I reached for the door handle, steeling myself for whatever horrors awaited me outside. And as I flung open the door and fled into the darkness, I could feel the weight of the night pressing in on me from all sides, suffocating me with its malevolent presence. The echoes of my footsteps reverberated through the stillness of the night as I fled from the sinister figure that pursued me through the darkness. Every breath came ragged and desperate, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled blindly through the tangled undergrowth, guided only by the pale glow of the moon overhead. Time lost all meaning as I ran, the woods stretching on infinitely in every direction, a labyrinth of twisted branches and gnarled roots that seemed to ensnare me at every turn. The moon hung high in the sky, its silvery light casting long, eerie shadows across the forest floor, but even its pale glow offered little solace in the face of the relentless darkness that surrounded me. And then, just when I felt that I could go on no longer, I stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight bathing the area in a ghostly pallor. In the center of the clearing stood a small, desolate cabin, its weathered walls sagging with age and neglect. Without hesitation, I dashed inside, the door slamming shut behind me with a resounding thud. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay, the only sound the creaking of floorboards beneath my feet as I made my way further into the darkness. With trembling hands, I barricaded the door with a nearby table, sealing myself off from the horrors that lurked outside. But even as I huddled in the darkness, seeking refuge from the terrors that pursued me, I could still hear the whispers, their voices echoing through the walls of the cabin like a haunting melody. I dared not make a sound, for fear that it would give away my location, but still, the whispers persisted, their words weaving a tapestry of dread and despair that wrapped around me like a shroud. Exhaustion eventually overcame me, and I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by visions of the sinister figure and its malevolent whispers. The night passed in a blur of haunting dreams and fitful slumber, until at last, the dawn's light filtered through the cabin's windows, banishing the shadows that lurked in the corners of my mind. With trembling hands, I pushed open the door and stepped out into the light of day, my body battered and bruised, but my spirit unbroken. The world seemed strangely ordinary in the harsh light of morning, as if the horrors of the night had been nothing more than a fever dream. But as I made my way back to the road, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach, for when I reached the spot where my car had broken down, there was nothing but an empty space, a chilling reminder of the terrors I had faced and the mysteries that still remained unsolved. And as I stood there, alone in the aftermath of the night's horrors, I knew that some nightmares are best left in the shadows, where they belong.